Good afternoon, good morning, hello. I am Anne Manson, and I am music director of the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra. I'm also a conductor who does other things. I conduct operas sometimes. I conduct orchestra concerts as well. I'm very interested in new music and new composers, and I often work with composers and librettists on new operas. I live in London, where it's very rainy a lot of the time. And I love coming to Winnipeg, where usually I get a lot more sun than we have, certainly in winter in Europe.
Yeah, coming up soon. Spring is just around the corner. So just as we're kind of getting started, do you want to just tell us a bit more about the role of artistic director with the MCO?
I think I'm part of a team with Vicki Young, and I tend to do the artistic side of the planning, and Vicki does pretty much everything else, and she does it really well. I don't think the organization would be able to go on without her. And particularly during the pandemic, she's been amazing. But my job is really the artistic side, and that means planning concerts. It means choosing soloists. It means choosing guest conductors. It means choosing the pieces that we play, and that includes pieces by living composers. And we've worked very closely with quite a few Canadian composers. We tend to work mainly with Canadian composers, and I spend a lot of time listening to Canadian music, new music, and trying to figure out who I think would work best with this orchestra, and whose work I feel is really, really strong and deserves maybe more of a hearing than it's had in the past. Of which composers would benefit most from the MCO programming their work and commissioning new work and giving them the opportunity to sit in rehearsal and participate, contribute in what their vision is and whether we're achieving it or not. So there's a lot that composers do that way. I also feel that when we're choosing soloists, we're trying to achieve a balance between younger soloists and older soloists who are experienced, really old, faithful, wonderful friends of the orchestra, such as James Ennis, Marc-André Hamelin, and a balance with younger, really quite young artists, some of whom have almost grown up with the MCO, like Misha Brugger-Gossman and Jan Leseshki. And so I'm constantly looking out for young Canadian exciting artists. By that I mean musicians and singers who we could bring to the MCO and introduce to the audience in Winnipeg. Really, and then once we've got our soloists and our guest conductors, I'm trying to balance programs in terms of bringing the audience new things and interesting things and things that will appeal to a range of listeners. We're very lucky in Winnipeg because we have an audience that's very knowledgeable about Canadian music. The CBC has been wonderful. There are classical music radio stations now in town that have been really helpful to us. And we have an audience that listens a lot to the radio and goes to lots of concerts, not just the MCO concerts, but other concerts. And so we have a really appreciative audience, and I'm trying to balance what we offer them so that there's something stimulating and engaging on our concerts, something that makes you think. And if we do new music, I make sure that it's really good new music. because so often you get audiences who don't want to come to concerts because there are new things on them. And we do not have that situation in Winnipeg. I do a lot of Haydn, and that is my own personal personal choice. I love Haydn, and I love the way the orchestra plays Haydn. And we've done a lot of Haydn over the past, really over my tenure as music director. And I think one of the things that we'll be looking at going into the future is other composers of the same period, and exploring them in a little bit more detail. And you'll be seeing some of that in next year's programming and in the programs going forward. Yeah, so that gives you a basic sense. I mean, obviously, we're also trying to plan projects and collaborations with other organizations. And so I do some of that. And really what I like to do is be looking forward in the long term, so that the programming we do this year is not the same as next year. And there's a sense that there are projects that grow over time. There's a sense that we work with certain composers over time so the audience can see them grow and develop and really get to know them well. And some of the projects we do, like the projects with the Cercle Molière, are projects that take multiple years of planning and even multiple years of execution. So yeah, so we're trying to look at all of that. Keep things interesting.
Yes, fantastic. And it's so wonderful to hear, well, it's not, definitely not everything that's involved, but just the general scope of the role of an artistic director, because maybe we don't always know artistic director, conductor, and maybe the difference there, but that's so useful. Thank you. And of course, we're going to be chatting about the upcoming MCO concert. I thought we could start by talking a bit more about the life of a conductor, maybe share some insights of the profession that audience may not know, and maybe they've always had questions. And I like to say that in these conversations, it's kind of like we're trying to demystify the music profession, because music is so fascinating to so many people. It's all around us, but maybe the behind the scenes of music making can seem mysterious to someone who doesn't have that musical training. And we have so many people in our audience that don't have formal training, but are big fans and big music lovers. One of the interesting aspects I thought we could chat about just today, and we'll have many of these conversations, but the type of physical, mental training that is essential for conductors and actually all musicians. And it's important to remember that we are athletes in many ways. So Anne, as a conductor, how do you prepare mentally and physically for a concert? It's a little bit of a big question, and maybe each concert's a bit different, but just some general thoughts on that for you.
It's a good question. You know, I've been doing concerts for quite a long time. And so I find it easier to prepare now than I did when I was starting out. I think my preparation is much more focused than it was when I started out. I know what I need to do now. And I have a kind of routine in the way I do it, prepare. I also feel that I know better what role the conductor needs to play. And it, you know, of course, with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra, we've worked together for a long time. And so I have a very good sense of what this orchestra needs from me. And the MCO is a wonderful orchestra. And it's an orchestra that can play the notes of all the pieces that we program. And I think what they need and what we all want when we're in a concert is some sense of how to elevate that performance beyond the notes. So of course I'm looking at the nuts and bolts of, what to beat in a contemporary piece that's changing meter all the time. And I'm looking at the nuts and bolts of, this particular symphony. And when Beethoven writes an accent, is it the same accent every time? Is it the same kind of accent that I would want in a Brahms symphony or in a Mahler symphony? There are all those details. I think that orchestras need a sense. There's the flossing that you do, which is getting the right notes in the right place, and having everybody play together and having the tuning be all right and all of that. And then there is the step beyond that. And I try and think about that a lot with the MCO, because I think one of the special things about the orchestra is how the degree to which they throw themselves into a performance. And I think that what they need from me is ideas about how to make this specific place special and what we're going to do in that specific place to bring it to life, and to let the music speak. So that sounds a bit vague, but I do spend quite a bit of time thinking about that kind of thing in advance of a concert.
As you're in the rehearsal days, and it's very concentrated, a few days of rehearsals before the concerts. What kind of process do you have there? And like even just getting your body ready to perform on stage. It's a very physical activity also.
That's true. I don't do that. I mean, I do kind of swim and exercise and that kind of thing, but I don't do that much specifically physically before a concert. I will say I do find it much harder to conduct a concert with a mask on, which is what we're doing now, because you can get a little bit winded quite quickly. It's a little bit like going for a jog with a mask on.
Yeah.
So I definitely find that challenging. But aside from that, I tend not to get physically tired in concerts. In any case, you're not really thinking in those terms, so if you are getting tired, you notice it afterward, not during the concert. And of course, in the rehearsal process with the orchestra, there are various steps to the process. So, for example, we're doing Kevin Lau's new oboe concerto in the upcoming concert that I'm conducting. And, the first step will be to work with the orchestra alone without the soloist, and just make sure all our ducks are in a row, that we know how to play it, and we know where the meter changes are. We have the right notes and all that. And then we will have another rehearsal where we add the oboe soloist. And then we will work with Caitlin to kind of bring those two pieces together. And then we will have another rehearsal where the composer, Kevin Lau, will be there, and he will have an opportunity to say, I remember the last time we did a piece of his, it was a while ago because of COVID and lockdown. Of course, we play in Westminster, which has a very live resonance. And when you cut off a chord, it lasts for a long time in that space. And the only comment I remember him making was that he wished I would wait longer in those pauses after cutting off a chord to let the chord resonate more. And I remember that very well, particularly because we took that piece on tour afterward, and we were in some venues that didn't have the same resonance as Westminster. So we couldn't quite sustain those pauses for such a long time because the music didn't carry in the space, or the echo of the cutoff chord didn't carry. So that gives you a sense of a kind of step-by-step progression that goes through the composer and even beyond the composer to the actual space that you're playing in, and how you add a piece by piece, in layers, you put a piece together.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is quite involved, and you're utilizing all of your knowledge and experience at every moment, right? to bring
Trying.
it to life. Yeah. And so you've already introduced us a little bit to some of that program, but would you like to tell us more about the other repertoire, and then just the program in general, and maybe even some of the musicians that'll be featured in the concert?
Well, of course, the LAU concerto that I was talking about features our own principal oboist, Caitlin Brahms-Jacobs, and so she will be taking the oboe soloist role in that. And we are doing a little tour afterwards, and so she will be touring with us, playing the concerto in, gosh, lots of different places. Pinawa, I think our last date is actually in Thompson.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think there's Flin, Flon, and Carman also.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting for us to be playing that repertoire outside of Winnipeg and so forth. So yes, we have that, and we also have another piece with a soloist, Odelina de la Martinez's Afro-Cuban songs, which are very much steeped. So Odelina de la Martinez grew up in Cuba. She lives in England now. She's a very prominent composer, conductor, and pianist in Europe. And this is a piece that is based on memories of her childhood and of listening to, I guess you might call it folk music, but listening to Afro-Cuban music on the streets in Cuba, in Havana, and outside. And she wrote these pieces with those kind of rhythms and melodies and texts in mind. And they are written in a kind of Cuban Spanish, so it will not sound like Spanish. It has a certain kind of accent to it. The soloist for the Afro-Cuban songs is Simone Ibbott Brown. She is an English singer, but has some Afro-Caribbean heritage, and I'm not sure whether it is Jamaican or from another part of the Caribbean. But she actually has worked with the composer on the song. She performed them at a Festival of American Music in the fall in London. And so this will be her second performance of the songs, and she does them with a Cuban accent, with dialect and the whole works. And she is a wonderful young British singer. So it's very exciting that we can bring her into Winnipeg to perform these pieces.
Yes.
And then we have Haydn Symphony 52, which is a wonderful symphony, kind of middle, early Haydn. It's a Sturm und Drang piece. It is very fiery, very stormy. It was part of that movement of expressing kind of violent, stormy emotions. And it's absolutely fabulous. The more Haydn symphonies we do, the more I am absolutely amazed by how he could produce so much wonderful music. It's truly incredible. And this piece is no exception. It's just an absolute beauty. We have a really special concerto on this concert, which is the Vivaldi Concerto. In fact, it's really written for two celli, but it's often done with viola and cello. And it's going to feature our own violist and cellist, Desiree Abbey and Pamela Fay. And I think it'll be an incredible treat for the audience, who already you will know Pam and Desi from concerts from playing in the orchestra, but to hear them as soloists. And in fact, I've actually heard them working on the piece already. They played a little bit, or Pam played a little bit for me the last time I was in Winnipeg, and it sounds fantastic. It's a beautiful piece. And it's going to be so much fun to work with them as soloists for the first time for me, even though I've worked with them for years in the orchestra. And so we really have 3 soloists from the orchestra for this concert, which is really exciting for me. And I think it's going to be really fun for the audience.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for the breakdown kind of the concert. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Look forward to there. And I know you mentioned already the small tour that we'll be doing in a few regions in the province. And I think most of that repertoire will be on that tour.
That is correct. We're not, the Afro-Cuban songs are not on the tour, but the Vivaldi and LAU concertos will be, yes. So it'll be Caitlin, Desi, and Pam all playing concertos, and the Haydn Symphony will be taking on tour as well. And we will be doing some of the fiddle tunes that we did in the October concert for anyone who came to that. These are kind of medley of fiddle tunes that we use often in our outreach group will use when working in remoter parts of the province with kids and local communities.
Now we have an idea of for what we can see on the tour that's just after this. So just also at the very end of April, start of May for the communities, see everyone, Carman, Pinawa, Flin, Flon, Thompson. Wow. That's very exciting. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's actually, this is my first time touring in Manitoba.
Oh, wow.
We've done concerts in Brandon before, but I have never been really beyond. So I'm very excited, hoping to see some bears.
Oh.
Apparently you often see them on the road driving around.
Hello to anyone who's watching in advance of the tour. You mentioned just a little bit already about working with living composers, and do you want to just reflect a little bit more on that?
Well, it's wonderful to have the opportunity to work with a live human being as a composer. And I've been really lucky because I've worked with a lot in my career. And it's just very interesting to be deep in a new piece and to have the actual composer themselves there to tell you what their intentions were, because what we have on the page as music is always just a representation of what's in the composer's mind. It's never a blueprint, you know, it's not a dictaphone. And so in a sense, we're always guessing what the composer wanted, and we get certain ideas. Certainly, you know, the orchestra and I have done a lot of Haydn together, and we kind of guess the same way in terms of our stylistic approach to Haydn now. But it is wonderful to have a real composer there who can tell you, this is what I was thinking.
Or also you have a bit of that collaboration too, that you have an idea, or that the orchestra brings out something that the composer didn't even imagine at first. It could sound
yeah, I love collaborating. And in fact, it is something, you know, very often if I'm working with a symphony orchestra, their expectation is, and I think in many ways their desire is for me to say, this is how the music goes. And one of the things that's really lovely about the MCO is I do come prepared to say, this is how the music goes. But I love the fact that there is a dialogue with the orchestra and that everybody's comfortable with a dialogue. Because it's really, really fun when you're a conductor to be able to collaborate with people, to have colleagues, and not to always be slightly isolated in your role as, you know, leader.
It's great for everyone involved. For
it
sure.
It really is, yeah.
And so this will actually be, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first spring season we have in a few years for the pandemic. So this is our first spring season. Is that right?
That's true.
Yeah,
that is, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right, because we did have a spring season the first year, but it was not live.
Yeah. So will this
It
be the
was,
first time you're in Winnipeg in the spring for a few years?
it is, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I feel I really missed 2 years with the orchestra, but in a sense, the orchestra almost missed 2 years, you know, in and of themselves. There were some activities, but it wasn't like we usually are. I think everybody's missed 2 years. That's kind of the way it's gone. So it'll be amazing to be back, in a serious, I think it really has already started for the orchestra.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A real serious season,
Yeah.
like the seasons of yore,
Yeah.
before all this happened. I think it's going to be very positive for the musicians and for the audience to have a sense that we're getting back to some kind of normalcy, and that we can, share these musical experiences together again.
Yeah. What do you like about Winnipeg in the springtime? If you can think back to when you were here a few years ago in the spring.
I always stay down by the Forks.
Okay.
Initially, of course, the MCO puts a lot of soloists and conductors in the Fort Garry Hotel. And if I'm there for longer, I'll stay in an apartment, an Airbnb down there. But what I really love to do is to walk across to the Forks and then walk along the river. And in spring, early summer, June, it's just beautiful down there. And you can walk all the way to downtown, to the Exchange, or you can cross the bridge and go into Saint Boniface and walk along there. You can do a loop. But I just like walking down there, and I always think about the history of Winnipeg. There are a lot of memorials, a lot of descriptions of Métis and First Nations communities, and how the joining of those two rivers was has always been a meeting place for peoples. And then the French voyageurs and the Métis. So whenever I go down there, I feel, not only does it feel like a beautiful natural environment, but it also feels like there's part of Winnipeg's history in that place.
Wonderful. And thinking ahead to the night of the concerts, and then it'll be available online shortly after. But what are you most looking forward to? And what do you hope the audience will experience at the concerts?
Well, I'm really looking forward to working with my own soloists from the orchestra. That's going to be very special for me. So working with Caitlin and Pam and Desi. And, one of the things about the MCO and performing in Westminster United Church is that the audience is so close to the stage. And so I think that experience of seeing these players as soloists and being right next to them, as I will be and as the audience will be, I think that's going to be, it's something I'm really looking forward to. And I think it's going to be something that's very special for the audience.
That's always been my favorite thing when I was a kid coming to the concert, seeing you conducting, being so close to the audience, coming with my parents and being right there, being close to the musicians. Yeah, it's such a special thing. So I'm sure many of our audience feels the same way. And the fact that you are on stage and you feel that with the audience. Wonderful.
Yeah, we're very lucky, I think, to have the MCO, and I think we're very lucky to have the church and the audience that we have here. It's all a kind of unique situation.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. It was so nice to meet you online. I'll see you in person soon.
Thank you, Suzu. It was a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you.
Absolutely. Okay, so safe travels, and we'll see you at the end of April.
Thank you, and see you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.